Third earthquake. 2 years later in January 2016, the sky was about to fall again. I had gone to pick up S from school. I was waiting for him in the car. I saw him arrive with a funny face. He told me how one of the older boys had sexually abused him. My blood ran cold. Director, police. Statement. Melanie procedure. We were stunned for a few days. I felt very bad. I said to myself, but I'll never get out. Since the abuse of M, I never let S out of my sight. Not for a second. The only place I let go of him was in school. I was devastated. I had been trying for all these years to get back on track, to try to erase, cover up this wound still festering, that bled with tears as soon as I spoke about it. I was overwhelmed. I felt cursed. S wasn't doing well either. We lay like corpses on the bed for 2 days, both of us curled up, not talking. Fortunately, his taekwondo master, whom I spoke to, had the good idea this Wednesday to arrange a fight with another boy. Like a seized engine, he started off sluggish and little by little we saw him restart and get back in action. He found his energy and his smile by fighting. It saved him and me, to see him revived, too. After the shock, we chose to fight and not to run away. The most shocking part of the story is that the school did not want to expel the guilty teenager. Once again, we had to leave. So we had to change schools again. Then a few months later, in spring, I found on internet the documentary Cost of Silence which had just been released, directed by an English devotee. Once again the taboo subject of child abuse was exposed within the International Devotee Organization. It showed in a remarkable way, how most of the leaders not only knew about the facts and said nothing, but worse, some of them were engaged in pedophile practices. I thought that M had been an isolated case at one point, but 20 years later I discovered a widespread and lasting network of corruption. At the same time, I learned that B.C. Swami was in London. I had not seen him for at least 5 years. I decided to go and meet him. I needed an answer. I decided to use the last €200 I had left to buy a plane ticket to the London mansion where he was staying. Unfortunately, things did not turn out as I had imagined. I was unpleasantly surprised to see that he didn't want to talk to me at all. I could barely see him for 4.5 minutes, stuck between the end of his Srimad Bhagavatam class and his breakfast. Things had changed. I learned, however, that he had spent the day with devotees at a spiritual party of which English Indians have the secret cutting cake ceremony. I was not invited. I was not part of the party. Not part of the clan. I was still in Zone B. This time I had had enough. I had tolerated it wisely for years without saying anything, swallowing all the events and keeping them to myself. I felt that I had not disturbed the world too much. I had, on the other hand, been quite disturbed by their world. Now, for me, the count was good. I had made my decision. It was over. I was leaving. While hanging around on the property, I saw Krishna drawn on a wall. He was looking at me. In my heart I was hearing, "Are you sure?" Yes. I was angry, very sad, and revolted. I was afraid at the same time. I felt I was making a profound decision. The moorings had given way. It was not a mood swing and a whim. No. My attachment had broken. Silently amongst general indifference. But who cares? I didn't care. In the afternoon I called SV, a long-time devout friend. She too has been in the reserve for a long time. I told her how I was doing. It was paradoxical to feel alone when the park was full of people. It was Sunday and the whole congregation of London Indian devotees was gathered there. But I felt surrounded by strangers and nobody was talking to me anyway. It was so far from the atmosphere I wanted to experience and imagined the early devotees had when Srila Prabhupada was there. Things had really changed. I flew back the next day. The seriousness of the situation must have been written all over my face, because M, who was there visiting after returning from India, detected it immediately. "What's going on?" I explained to her and she understood. I went to the altar, removed Swami's picture and left only Srila Prabhupada and the Parampara. From now on, Srila Prabhupada would be my only reference point. I didn't want to know anything else except to chant Hare Krishna, continue my sadhana as best I could, continue to read Srila Prabhupada's books as best I could, and that was it. I cut ties with this organization which had nothing to do with what Srila Prabhupada wanted but had become a kind of corrupt social club. Externally anyway, it didn't make much difference. I had been living independently for years, I had a job, I worked at home, and I looked after the children. It was inside that it was changing. I was shifting the paradigm and sweeping away what had been weighing on me all these years. After this inner tsunami, life went on. I continued my inner conversations while trying to stay fixed in my japa in the midst of daily occupations and telephone consultations with clients or patients. And sometimes, when communications came up, I wrote them down in a notebook. 1 year later, on a Saturday morning, April 1st, 2017, I received this information in my heart. Srila Prabhupada, you have indulged in saying and doing things during my absence that are detrimental to the Sankirtan movement I have put so much effort into building. You have spoiled everything with your nonsense. It is up to you to suffer and take the consequences. From now on, I will not be around in this so-called Sankirtan movement. I am withdrawing. Those who want to follow by the book will recognize me in their hearts even if they are lost in the middle of nowhere and even if they have never been in contact with this so-called movement before. I am very angry and disappointed with those to whom I have entrusted the responsibilities of the GBC, Government Body Commission, because none of them reflect the true spirit of dedication of a Vaishnav, polluted by the desire for fame and glory. I will gather people by myself and show them what the truth is. All of them, one by one, will be removed from their so-called position. I will dismantle this movement from where I stand. It is a huge shock in everyone's heart to let someone leave a Vaishnav temple without being happy. I cannot tolerate this any longer. I will show you. Chant very carefully in the coming weeks. All glories to my Guru Maharaja. Shri Krishna is watching you, never forget it. Always chant and you will be safe. Signed, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Postscriptum, I will call you one by one from the heart. You will have to listen carefully during your japa. Don't try to do things in a big way, but go to the end of the little things you do. Be more precise in your concepts, ideas, etc., leave no stone unturned. Then I am shown, through his books and communication in the heart, Srila Prabhupada creates a network of invisible connection, able to transform the world. This change will come from individual initiative, all coming from invisible connections, so not linked to a physical structure or organization. New ideas will emerge from these networks of connections. Me, are you alone, Srila Prabhupada? Srila Prabhupada. The whole spiritual community above is watching. This is a very important time for humans. A time of change. A great time of freedom is coming for humanity. It is imminent. Stay tuned. Later I found in one of his classes in Australia this passage which echoed this communication. Things that are not visible to the material eyes are subtle. And the spirit soul is always subtle. Human life is therefore meant to understand this spiritual soul and the Supreme Soul. It was in this context that, in the summer of 2017, I was going to have a totally stunning experience that would turn my life upside down. I had met few years earlier a couple of therapists who got separated after a while. It is usually at such times that people come to me for help. C had contacted me one day via Facebook because she had met someone else and wanted my advice. I told her things, but she didn't agree and didn't accept them. I was used to it, so I didn't push. A few months later, she contacted me again telling me that what I had told her was true. So we started talking more often. At the end of July 2017, she told me that Michelle Almaraz would soon be coming to her house with the Uruguay stone. I didn't know this stone nor this man at all. But the subject appealed to me. I was alone without S for a fortnight and therefore had more time on my hands. Here is the information I found on this stone. This 130-million-year-old agate geode was discovered more than 40 years ago in Uruguay by layers Luciano Lucas, a stone miner from father to son. Much later, in 2007, it was during a tourist trip to Uruguay that Michel Almaraz, a Frenchman, met the stone. A surprising series of coincidences brought him into its presence. He stayed there for hours. Since then, he has presented it in many countries. A project that, by his own admission, has changed his career as a corporate IT project manager. The first thing that strikes you is its shape, which, when you look at the card, is modeled on that of Uruguay, a heart. Another surprising fact is the symbols and writings in quartz crystals inscribed inside, which have given rise to many interpretations. But that is not the point. As Michel tells us, the stone, an energetic reharmonization seems to take place on our assembly, a tiny but perceptible change of atmosphere. As if the geode, exposed in the room, was subtly acting on this frenzy so common in the capital. The initial agitation, of a mental nature, gives way to a softer energy. Imperceptibly, each person turns to his or her neighbor, whether unknown or not, to share. It is difficult to express what we feel, confides Michel Almaraz. Except that at each meeting, the miracle takes place. In contact with the stone, everyone relaxes and then glows. For Pierre, a participant, the purpose of the stone is peace, it opens the heart. Intrigued by this text, I downloaded a photo of the stone, printed it out and placed it on the altar. Then I took my rosary and began to chant softly as I continued to place my intention on the stone. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. After a few moments, I was overcome with uncontrollable sobs and this thought came to me. But why was this done to him? Why didn't they do anything to stop it? And I was crying with deep, convulsive sobs. I was both observing and at the same time immersed in infinite pain and sadness. I understood it was about Jesus, and this stone triggered an upwelling of intense emotional memories. I was surprised and shocked because until now my relationship with the Christian world had always been very distant. As I explained at the very beginning, I was born into a Catholic family, but my spiritual life very quickly branched off into the path of bhakti and the practice of chanting the holy names. So I had no particular meditation on Lord Jesus. But there, a raw, violent emotion exploded in my face, in direct link with him, simply because I had concentrated on this stone while chanting the Maha Mantra. I tried to sort out my emotions and turned as always to Srila Prabhupada. Again, I felt my channel open. What follows is a transcript of the communications I received non-stop for 15 days, following my contact with the Uruguay stone. This stone shattered my heart, and I can say, 5 years later, as I finish writing these lines, that there really was a before and after.